In 1978, Bernie Marcus was fired. After decades climbing the corporate ladder in retail, the 49-year-old CEO of a home improvement chain found himself out of work, out of options, and staring down the terrifying prospect of starting over at 50. But instead of giving up, Marcus rolled the dice. The gamble? A radical new idea. A massive warehouse where ordinary people could buy home improvement supplies at wholesale prices, something no one had ever tried before. That gamble became the Home Depot. As Marcus later said, "Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. Without it, there would be no Home Depot." Fired at 49. Bernie Marcus wasn't new to the world of retail. By the late 1970s, he had already spent decades climbing through the ranks of America's hardware and home improvement chains. He understood everything from store layouts and supplier negotiations to the psychology of customers wandering aisles on a Saturday morning. By all accounts, he had the pedigree of a seasoned executive and the track record of a man who had mastered his industry. But in 1978, everything unraveled. At Handy Dan, the successful improvement chain where Marcus served as CEO, a bitter boardroom dispute spiraled out of control. Alliances shifted, tempers flared, and politics outweighed performance. When the dust settled, Marcus found himself out of a job, fired, dismissed, not for lack of talent or vision, but for being caught on the wrong side of corporate maneuvering. It was a crushing blow. At 49, many executives in his position would have quietly looked for another corner office. They would have traded ambition for stability, polished their resumes, and settled into a smaller role somewhere else. After all, who starts over from scratch that late in the game? But Marcus refused to see it as the end of his story. To him, the firing wasn't a sentence, it was a release. "If the corporate world didn't want me," he later said, "fine, I'd build something of my own." That defiance became fuel. Nights once filled with worry turned into sessions at his kitchen table, sketching ideas and rethinking what a retail store could be. He wasn't planning revenge, he was planning a reinvention. This was the turning point, the moment when loss cracked open the door to legacy. Chapter 2: The Partnership with Arthur Blank. Marcus wasn't alone in his exile from Handy Dan. His trusted colleague, Arthur Blank, had also been caught in the fallout of the same corporate shakeup. Both men found themselves suddenly adrift, talented executives with years of experience, but no titles, no offices, and no safety nets. Yet instead of seeing themselves as casualties, they chose to see themselves as co-conspirators in reinvention. Over endless late-night coffee sessions, the two men began sketching out an idea that was as bold as it was unconventional. What if home improvement retail could look completely different? What if, instead of polished displays and high markups, customers walked into a massive, no-frills warehouse, one brimming with every tool, fixture, and material they could need? Prices would be lower, the selection far wider, and the experience more hands-on. Contractors, hobbyists, and first-time homeowners alike could all find what they needed under one roof. This was more than a business concept. It was a philosophy. "We wanted to democratize home improvement," Marcus later explained. "Not just for contractors, but for everyday people." Hardware stores had always catered to professionals or small-scale DIYers, but Marcus and Blank imagined something far more inclusive. A place where the scale itself created opportunity. The partnership worked because their strengths complemented each other. Marcus was the big-picture strategist, the dreamer who saw possibilities others ignored. Blank was the operator, the detail-oriented builder who could turn vision into execution. Together, they became more than just two fired executives. They became architects of a revolution. What began as frustration over coffee was quickly becoming the blueprint for a retail empire. The warehouse gamble. By 1979, Marcus and Blank were ready to test their daring idea in the real world. They scraped together what resources they could, leaned heavily on borrowed money, and persuaded a handful of investors to take a chance on something that, to many, sounded absurd. With everything on the line, they opened the very first two Home Depot stores in Atlanta, Georgia. These weren't ordinary hardware stores. Each location was an astonishing 60,000 square feet, spaces so vast they were often compared to airplane hangars. Inside, the shelves towered with tools, lumber, paint, and plumbing supplies. The aisles seemed to stretch on endlessly, inviting customers to wander, explore, and imagine what they could build. But not everyone was impressed. Skeptics were quick to pounce. Industry insiders scoffed, arguing that ordinary customers would be intimidated by such cavernous spaces. Who wanted to shop in a warehouse? Shoppers, they predicted, would prefer the cozy familiarity of small neighborhood hardware stores. Competitors dismissed the concept outright, predicting quick and inevitable failure. Yet the gamble worked. Almost immediately, customers discovered something revolutionary. Not only were the prices lower than they had ever seen, but the selection was staggering. They could find everything for their projects under one roof, without having to drive across town to specialty shops. Even more importantly, the staff, clad in bright orange aprons, was approachable, friendly, and most crucially, knowledgeable. Employees didn't just sell products. They gave advice, tips, and encouragement. Shopping at Home Depot felt less like a transaction and more like empowerment. What critics mocked as too big to succeed had, in reality, become the perfect formula for transformation. Key takeaway number 1: failure as fuel. Marcus's first great lesson is simple but powerful. Sometimes, being fired is actually freedom in disguise. For him, the day he was pushed out of Handy Dan wasn't the closing chapter of his career. It was the spark that lit an entirely new fire. What looked like humiliation became liberation. What seemed like a loss became the opening for reinvention. Most people see failure as final, a dead end, a mark that you weren't good enough. But Marcus reframed it. That rejection didn't shrink him. It forced him to think bigger, bolder, and differently than he had ever done before. He had stayed safely in the corporate world. He might have lived a comfortable life as another executive in another company. Instead, failure shoved him off the predictable path and into uncharted territory. It's a reminder that endings can often be disguised beginnings. What feels like being thrown out may actually be being pushed forward. Marcus himself admitted that without that painful exit, the Home Depot may never have been born. In other words, the very thing that seemed to break him became the foundation for his legacy. For anyone watching, that's the lesson worth carrying. Failure isn't always an obstacle. Sometimes it's the doorway, the rejection letter, the layoff, the setback. They can all be fuel if you choose to use them. Marcus turned his greatest professional defeat into one of the greatest retail success stories in history. Failure didn't end him. Failure defined him. And more importantly, failure propelled him. Building the orange culture. From the very beginning, Marcus understood that Home Depot could never succeed by being just another big box store. Price mattered. Selection mattered. But the true differentiator would be something harder to copy: the service. He wanted a culture that turned shopping into learning, and customers into confident doers. That vision came to life through a simple but powerful symbol: the orange apron. More than just a uniform, it became a badge of responsibility. Employees weren't there simply to stock shelves or ring up items. They were there to teach, to guide, and to empower. In those early stores, it wasn't uncommon to see an associate kneeling on the floor, sketching out wiring diagrams on a scrap of wood, or patiently walking a nervous homeowner through the steps of tiling a bathroom. Customers didn't just leave with supplies, they left with the know-how to tackle projects they never thought possible. Marcus often said, "We weren't selling products, we were selling confidence." That mantra became the foundation of Home Depot's orange culture, a philosophy that every interaction was an opportunity to educate, not just transact. Over time, the company formalized that spirit into DIY clinics, workshops, and training sessions, making the store feel less like a warehouse and more like a community classroom. For customers, the message was clear: you don't need to be a professional contractor to build, fix, or improve. With the right tools, a little guidance, and the confidence that comes with knowledge, Anyone could do it. That culture of empowerment didn't just build loyalty, it built a movement. Key takeaway number 2: service scales trust. The second great lesson from Marcus and Blank's journey is this: scaling a business isn't just about stacking inventory higher or building bigger stores. It's about building trust. Anyone could copy a warehouse model. Competitors could mimic the square footage, the shelving systems, even the low prices. But what they couldn't easily copy was the experience. The sense that walking into a Home Depot meant finding not only what you needed, but someone who genuinely cared about whether you could use it. Service wasn't an add-on, it was the foundation. By embedding service into the company's DNA, Home Depot transformed what could have been intimidating, cavernous aisles into empowering journeys. Customers who might have once felt overwhelmed by endless rows of tools and supplies instead felt supported, guided, and inspired. That support built trust, and trust, in turn, created loyalty. Loyalty became the fuel that allowed Home Depot to scale at a breathtaking pace. Shoppers didn't just return for low prices, they returned because they believed in the orange apron promise. Help would always be there when they needed it. That reputation spread by word of mouth, creating a kind of grassroots marketing that no advertising budget could buy. Within just a few years, the results spoke for themselves. From 2 stores in 1979 to 19 stores by 1983, Home Depot's growth tracked directly alongside rising customer satisfaction. The formula was clear: service built trust, trust built loyalty, and loyalty built an empire. The lesson? When you scale service, you scale success. Explosive growth. By the early 1980s, it was clear Home Depot wasn't just a business experiment. It was a retail revolution. What had begun as 2 cavernous warehouses in Atlanta quickly became a model that reshaped an entire industry. Investors who had once dismissed Marcus and Blank as dreamers now rushed to buy in. Wall Street, initially skeptical of the too-big-to-work concept, suddenly saw dollar signs in those sprawling orange-shelved aisles. Customers, too, voted with their feet. Week after week, the stores overflowed with contractors, homeowners, and DIY novices, all eager to take part in this new style of shopping. Momentum built quickly. In 1981, just 2 years after the first stores opened, Home Depot launched its initial public offering on NASDAQ. The IPO not only brought in fresh capital, but it also gave the company a national stage. With each passing year, expansion accelerated. Store counts multiplied, revenue surged, and the orange apron became one of the most recognizable symbols in retail. By 1989, barely a decade after launch, Home Depot had overtaken all competitors to become the largest home improvement retailer in the United States. It was a stunning rise, one that even Marcus himself sometimes struggled to put into words. Reflecting on the transformation, he put it simply: we went from being the crazy guys with giant warehouses to the company everyone else was chasing. The gamble that so many predicted would fail had not only succeeded, it had redrawn the competitive map. What began as rejection in a boardroom had grown into one of the fastest, most disruptive success stories in American retail history. Key takeaway number 3: age is just the beginning. Perhaps the most powerful element of Bernie Marcus's story isn't just the scale of his success, it's when it began. At 50 years old, most people are told to start playing it safe. Careers are supposed to plateau, not restart. Risk is supposed to shrink, not grow. Yet Marcus flipped that narrative upside down. At the very age when many executives would have been polishing resumes, downsizing their ambitions, or quietly planning retirement, Marcus was winding risk up, not down. He chose to bet everything on an idea so audacious that the industry mocked it. His decision wasn't youthful recklessness, it was seasoned confidence. A lifetime of experience had prepared him for that leap, and he took it with both hands. What his story proves is that entrepreneurship isn't a young man's game. It's an endurance game. It's not about who starts the fastest, but who lasts the longest. Who learns from setbacks? And who is willing to start again when others think it's too late? Marcus himself put it best. Starting late doesn't mean you've missed your chance. It means you're finally ready. His words carry weight because they reflect lived experience. The setbacks, the firings, the doubts. All of it became preparation for the moment he was bold enough to build something lasting. For anyone watching, the takeaway is clear. Age doesn't close doors. It can open them. The years behind you are not a limitation. They are an asset. Marcus didn't just build a company at 50. He built proof that beginnings don't have an expiration date. Giving back. The philanthropy chapter. After stepping down as CEO in 1997, Bernie Marcus didn't simply retire to enjoy his fortune. Instead, he shifted his energy toward a different mission: giving it away. With the same determination that built Home Depot into a retail giant, Marcus poured his focus into philanthropy, turning personal wealth into public good. Through the Marcus Foundation, he has donated billions of dollars to causes close to his heart. Medical research has been a cornerstone, funding breakthroughs in healthcare that save and improve lives. He has been a champion for autism support, building programs and centers that provide resources for families who often feel overlooked. Veterans, too, have been at the center of his giving, with Marcus helping to fund rehabilitation programs, mental health care, and services designed to honor and support those who served. To Marcus, philanthropy wasn't a side project. It was the natural continuation of his life's work. The same belief that drove Home Depot, the idea of empowering ordinary people, carried into his charitable giving. Only this time, the stakes weren't about fixing homes, but about healing lives. Success means nothing unless you use it to lift others, he once said. Those words defined his second act. His fortune, built from what skeptics once called a warehouse gamble, has become a lifeline for countless people and communities. In many ways, Marcus's philanthropy underscores the deepest lesson of his journey. Wealth isn't measured by what you keep, but by what you give. His legacy isn't just orange shelves and big box stores. It's hope, healing, and a reminder that true success is best shared. Why this matters? So why does Bernie Marcus's story matter? Why revisit the journey of a man fired at 49 who went on to build a retail empire? Because his story is bigger than hardware. It's a blueprint for resilience, vision, and the courage to start over when the world insists it's too late. It matters because it reminds us that failure isn't final. A boardroom rejection that could have ended his career instead ignited his greatest achievement. Marcus teaches us that setbacks are not stop signs, they are redirections. Sometimes the thing we fear most, the door slamming shut, is the very push that forces us towards something greater. It matters because it proves that risk has no age limit. In a culture that often glorifies youth as the driver of innovation, Marcus stands as proof that experience, persistence, and endurance are just as powerful. At 50, he wasn't past his prime. He was perfectly positioned to leap. His life challenges the myth that ambition has an expiration date. And it matters because it shows how one gamble can ripple outward, reshaping not only a life, but an entire industry. Home Depot didn't just redefine home improvement retail, it democratized it. It gave everyday people the tools and confidence to take ownership of their own projects. And the wealth it created didn't stop at Marcus's pocket. It flowed outward into hospitals, research centers, and programs that continue to change lives today. Bernie Marcus's journey isn't just a story of business success. It's a reminder that reinvention is always possible, that courage pays dividends, and that the right gamble, taken at the right time, can build a legacy far larger than yourself. Fired at 49, reinvented at 50, billionaire philanthropist by 70. Bernie Marcus turned rejection into reinvention and built one of the most recognizable brands in America. As Marcus once said, "I didn't set out to get rich. I set out to prove I wasn't finished. Turns out, I was just getting started." What do you think? Should more people take risks later in life? Or is Marcus's story one in a million? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because sometimes the second act is the one that changes everything. Stay blessed and stay curious.